O silêncio da morte pareceu engolir o desfiladeiro inteiro. Sob a luz pálida do fim da tarde, uma mulher imóvel jazia entre os corpos espalhados da carroça atacada. Seu peito arfando em prece silenciosa, os olhos fixos no céu já tingido de sangue, fingindo estar morta para enganar a morte que acabara de cessar. A poeira ainda dançava no ar pesado e o cheiro metálico de sangue misturava-se ao perfume seco da terra rachada. Aquele desfiladeiro, uma garganta estreita entre muralhas de pedra que pareciam vigiar, revelava a crueldade do massacre recente. Pedras escurecidas pelo sol, pedaços de madeira quebrada e fragmentos de restos humanos silenciavam o cenário, enquanto o vento assobiava através do vale estreito, trazendo ecos de passado e presságios sombrios. Ela sentia as costelas latejarem, um ferimento surdo que a lembrava. A fragilidade de seu corpo cansado, o rosto sujo, emoldurado por cabelos desgrenhados, escondia a febre urgente do medo que tentava silenciar dentro de si. Cada respiração era um desafio, um esforço por permanecer invisível dentro daquela cama fria de morte. O relógio da vida parecia marcar segundos eternos no compasso de seu coração descompassado. Mas não estava sozinha. Entre as sombras que a tarde ainda desenhava, uma figura se movia com a paciência e o silêncio de quem leu os sinais da terra e do tempo. O chefe Apache, um homem marcado pelos anos, cuja pele curtida carregava histórias da luta, da perda e da sabedoria ancestral. Seu olhar de predador e de sábio mesclava prudência e um raro lampejo de compaixão. Ele caminhava devagar, analítico, absorvendo cada detalhe daquele massacre sem pressa, com o peso de quem carrega os segredos do deserto e a responsabilidade pela sobrevivência. Então ele ouviu um sussurro trêmulo, quase imperceptível. Não era o vento, nem o ranger antigo das pedras. Era uma voz frágil, que escapava com o fio tênue da esperança. Um murmúrio quebradiço que denunciava sua presença oculta sob os corpos. O chefe parou, um instante que pareceu dilatar o tempo. Seus olhos encontraram o lugar exato daquele sussurro. Um olhar hesitante, carregado de medo e determinação. Ele soube que ela dependia daquele momento, que sua vida pendia na balança entre o silêncio e o ser descoberta. O ar ao redor se carregou com a tensão de uma escolha milenar, a balança entre a caça e a humanidade inclinando-se numa tênue linha. Com um gesto lento e cuidadoso, o chefe decidiu poupar aquela existência vulnerável, reconhecendo ali uma força escondida, um valor que não se extinguiria tão facilmente. Contudo, enquanto o instinto de proteção se firmava, sua atenção voltou-se para o horizonte. Ao longe, empunhando a ameaça da violência que nunca abandona essas terras, a silhueta de uma patrulha inimiga surgia como uma sombra grotesca, avançando com a promessa de destruição. O destino agora se revelava em duas vozes, duas forças prestes a colidir. A defesa da vida frágil e a tempestade que se aproximava. Muitos companheiros de jornada que acompanham nossas lendas por estas terras esquecidas nos contaram que o destino, ou o algoritmo traiçoeiro do YouTube, às vezes desfaz suas inscrições sem aviso. Antes que a próxima trilha perigosa se revele e uma nova reviravolta aconteça, dê uma espiada rápida aí embaixo do vídeo e garanta que você ainda está inscrito em nosso bando para não perder o fio da meada. Não queremos que você perca nenhuma das vozes que ecoam deste vale. Verifique sua inscrição agora e junte-se à nossa saga. The chief Apache's fingers tightened around the woman's upper arm, his grip firm but cautious, as he guided her silently through the thickening shadows of the ravine. Her breaths came shallow and ragged, the shock of the wagon attack still clawing inside her chest. But every step forward was a step away from death's immediate grasp. The ground beneath them was rough and uneven, littered with scattered stones and splintered branches, remnants of a world that balanced precariously between. Dared not speak. The faint tremor in her throat would betray her still lingering fear. Yet, beneath the stoic exterior of the chief, a quiet storm brewed, a tumult of honor, survival, and doubt. To harbor an enemy was no small risk. His people's safety weighed heavily on his shoulders. Yet, there was something in the flicker of life she bore against all odds that stirred a reluctant mercy. They slipped through a narrow crevice in the rocks, and ahead lay the hidden sanctuary, a cluster of low huts camouflaged beneath the umbrella of towering pines, deep within Apache lands. The air here was cooler, scented faintly with pine resin and damp earth, a stark contrast to the blood and dust of the ravine's edge. Silence engulfed them, but it was a waiting silence, taut as a bowstring, pregnant with uncertainty. The chief's eyes never rested. They scanned for movement, listening intently for threats lurking beyond the underbrush. Behind him, she shuffled carefully, each step sending a tiny shiver up her spine, not from cold, but from the weight of being an outsider in a world she barely understood. As they reached the enclave's outskirts, figures emerged, Apache warriors whose gazes burned with fierce suspicion. The woman's heart thudded painfully, but the chief raised a hand in a warning gesture. "This one lives yet," he murmured gravely. "Not by my will alone." No one questioned him. The tribe trusted the chief's judgment as law, but curiosity twined with their glances, shadows of doubt flickering in their eyes. The woman's gaze darted to the nearest fire, where embers glowed weakly in the dusk. To their surprise, a slight nod came from a stoic elder woman, a silent acknowledgement that perhaps life held cracks where mercy could seep in. They were led to a concealed hut at the heart of the settlement, walls woven from sturdy branches and earth, a shelter from the harsh winds and from prying eyes. The woman sank to the bare floor as the chief removed his headdress, revealing a face carved by years of hardship, yet softened by kindness that few would readily see. His voice, when he spoke, was low and tethered to pain. "Enemies do not forgive easily. Helping you puts all at peril." She kept her eyes fixed on the ground, her fingers curling tightly around a ragged piece of cloth. The scars beneath her clothes itched with old memories, wounds that burned, sharper than the physical ones. A secret lay buried within her, one she guarded fiercely. To reveal it could bring death not just upon herself, but on those who showed her kindness. "I am no threat," she whispered, voice barely more than the breeze. "I carry only truths, truths that may yet change the fate of this land." Did he believe her? She could not tell. The chief's gaze lingered a moment longer, weighing the friction between trust and danger. Around them, the twilight deepened, shadows swallowing the sun's last warmth, and beyond the safety of the hut, the world remained relentless. Suddenly, cracks of distant sounds tore through the stillness, hoofbeats pounding the earth like a drumbeat of doom. Shouts and the clatter of weapons echoed faintly but unmistakably. The hunt had begun. Enemy was close, their search relentless. The chief rose swiftly, alert and grim. Their greed blinds them. They chase a ghost. He glanced back at the woman, eyes sharp. We must move, but cautiously. This land knows every secret trail. I will shield you as best I can. The woman's pulse quickened. Fear pulsed alongside a fragile thread of hope. She swallowed hard, stepping into the untenable alliance fate had carved for them. Behind the veil of mistrust, a bond simmered, fragile, uneven, but alive. They slipped into the deeper woods, where towering trees wove a lattice of shadows and whispers. The chief moved with intimate knowledge, guiding her through dense undergrowth and across hidden paths. Every crack of twig, every rustle of leaf, set a nerve alight. Her gaze flicked over the impenetrable darkness, wondering what scenes of survival and sacrifice those woods had witnessed. In the silence between footsteps, she wondered how long she could bear the weight of a secret that could tip the fragile balance between war and peace. The chief's quiet presence was a tether, not comfort, but necessity. She mused that survival might demand a price far greater than the blood spilled on those sun-baked stones. Their fragile truce was shattered by distant cries, enemy scouts shouting commands, the echo of horses pounding nearer. The chase was closing in, and with it, the cruel certainty that the time for hiding was shrinking fast. Her whisper, barely audible, mingled with the wind. They come. The chief's hand tightened once more, resolute and fierce, eyes burning like coals beneath his weathered brow. Then we must stand, not as hunter and hunted, but as those who refuse to be broken. From the shifting tree line came the ominous clatter, the first horns of the hunt announcing the approach of forces that sought to claim blood for blood. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The chase was no longer distant, it was here. The forest around them throbbed with tension, the weight of the chase pressing down like a suffocating blanket. The chief's grip on the woman's arm was steady, rounding her in the relentless swirl of fear and hope that mingled beneath the towering trees. Each step cut through the underbrush, the crunch of dry twigs and brittle leaves a sharp reminder of how close their pursuers had come. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a young warrior cloaked in the muted earth tones of their people, eyes sharp and wary as a hawk's. His gaze fixed narrowly on the stranger, suspicion furrowing his brow. He stepped forward with a measured authority, the tension in his stance unmistakable. "You bring danger here," the youth declared, voice low but edged with cold steel. "Why do you linger within our lands, stranger? Why should we trust your steps aren't traced by death's hounds?" The chief's expression tightened. "She is not our enemy," he answered slowly, the weight of his years grounding his words. "For now, she walks with us, shielded not by friendship, but by necessity. The danger at our door is greater than her shadow." The young warrior's eyes narrowed as he studied the woman closely. The faint bruises shadowing her face and hands told tales of violence born, of survival clawed from the jaws of destruction. Yet something deeper stirred, a flicker of unspoken knowledge, a thread woven between past and present that hinted she carried more than just the marks of battle. Reluctantly, the warrior sank slightly, the edge of his defiance softening. I will ride with you, for now, but beware. The forest bears witness, and our paths are carved by more than daylight. Gratitude flickered briefly in her eyes, but she said nothing. Words were fragile here, weighted by mistrust and unspoken fears. Instead, she focused on steadying her breath, trying to lock her thoughts away from the pounding of hooves that had grown nearer with each passing heartbeat. They plunged deeper into the wilds, uneven ground laced with roots like ancient veins beneath the earth, the air thick with pine and the ghost of distant rain. The chief moved with practiced caution, weaving a subtle path through hidden trails that seemed known only to him. The woman followed close, aching muscles burning with exhaustion, her skin alive to every sound and shadow. The young warrior rode silently beside them, his glare more watchful than welcoming. Yet underneath his vigilance lay an unspoken truth, the necessity of their union, fragile as a thread in the wind. As the hours dragged on, cracks in the woman's silence began to open like delicate blossoms. In a moment shared beneath a canopy swaying gently with twilight, she offered a hesitant revelation, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am not merely a survivor," she confessed, eyes dark with a memory that clutched her throat like a vice. "There are truths I carry, secrets whispered in shadows, threads of betrayal that stretch beyond these hills. My life is bound to forces that could unravel the fragile peace here." The chief's gaze sharpened, a storm flickering just beneath his calm exterior. "Secrets can burn as fiercely as arrows," he murmured. "If truth spills now, will it bring salvation or flame the fires of war?" She pressed her hands together, knuckles white. "I know little of this land's wounds, only that what I carry may change the balance of power. If we do not act, many will fall." The young warrior shifted, eyes narrowing as if weighing the gravity of such words against his loyalty. But no answer was spoken. The forest swallowed their fears, leaving only the pulse of uncertainty. Suddenly, the faint crack of a snapped branch shattered the fragile quiet. The chief's eyes snapped toward the sound, muscles coiling like a spring. The scent of dust and the rhythmic beat of hooves pierced the once peaceful air, enemy forces drawing inexorably closer. "They come," the woman whispered, the tremble in her voice betraying the cool mask she wore. The pulse of danger quickened, threading through all their veins. The chief's hand tightened fiercely around a bow slung at his back. "The chase is near," he replied grimly. "We know these woods, but they are blind in their hunger. We must move and stand as one." The young warrior inhaled sharply, the sharp edge of his tension transforming into a grim resolve. "I will hold the flank," he vowed. "Let no shadow pass unnoticed." Together, they pressed into the green depths, a trio bound not by trust, but by the unyielding need to survive. Every rustle, Every shifting leaf became an ominous herald of impending conflict. The woman's heart hammered against ribs that ached with fatigue. The secret she bore felt heavier than any burden before. Yet in the charged silence of the forest, under the watchful eyes of her reluctant protectors, she found a trembling flicker of strength, a fragile hope, spun from whispered promises and the fierce will to endure. The sounds of pursuit crescendoed, a crescendo that o'er relentless, unyielding. The chase was no longer a distant echo, but a storm roaring through the nights and trees. Their fragile alliance hung by a thread as they darted into shadows. The coming hour darkened by the presence of hunters closing in on the prey. And, amid the gathering gloom, the young warrior halted abruptly, his gaze fixed on the soft earth beneath, a set of fresh, deep tracks pressed firmly into the soil. "They are near," he said quietly, voice low and urgent. "The hunters draw close. Their breath is on our backs, swift and merciless." The ancient ruins rose from the earth like the bones of a forgotten giant, their weathered stones mottled by age and wrapped in the silent cloak of twilight. Beneath a sky bruised with the last embers of day, the Apache chief led the woman with cautious steps toward the sacred remains. Each footfall echoed faintly against the cracked flagstones, the weight of history pressing down like the thickening dusk around them. Here, the air was heavy with reverence, steeped in stories told by elders. Beneath starlit skies, tales of whispers, the voices of spirits woven into the very wind. The chief paused before a circle of cracked stones, tracing invisible lines with fingers calloused by years of survival. His eyes, dark and deep, shimmered with remembrance as he spoke softly, as if imparting a truth held secret for generations. "Our people listen to the whispers," he said, voice low and reverent. "Not just voices of flesh and bone, but those carried beyond. Spirits guiding, warning, sometimes deceiving. They are the unseen threads weaving the fate of all who walk this land." The woman drew a trembling breath, her fear mingling with the solemnity of the place. She struggled to still the ragged beat of her heart as memories pressed on her chest. Nostalgia mingled with dread. She swallowed, voice barely audible in the quiet. "I once heard a whisper, something forbidden, a secret spoken in shadows beyond my knowledge. It was a tremulous breath of truth that might tilt the balance, not just of these lands, but of lives held like fragile glass." The chief's gaze narrowed, ember of curiosity igniting in the depths of his caution. "Whispers can guide to salvation or lead to ruin," he warned. "Speak carefully. There is power in words, but greater still in silence." Her eyes flickered with raw, unguarded fear. The secret spoke of betrayal, a force lurking, one who walks like friend but carries the knife of treachery. If allowed to strike, the wounds will bleed wide, severing trust and staining the earth with fire. A heavy wind stirred, whispering through the ruins and tugging at loose stones as if the very land listened, breath held tight. The chief's hand clenched into a fist, knuckles blanching, his face etched with pain, torn between the need for prudence and the thrumming urgency of that warning. Before the woman could answer further, a sudden rustle cracked the fragile silence. Eyes darted to the darkened tree line, where a shadowy figure cloaked beneath a hood moved with deliberate stillness. The silhouette melded with the gathering night, barely more than a breath on the wind. "The forest does not forget," the chief murmured under his breath, voice tight. Neither spoke as the figure advanced, footsteps ghost-light against the dry leaves. The woman's breath caught, body coiled in tense anticipation. The ancient stones bore witness to this fragile moment. A heartbeat on the edge of a blade. From the shadows, the encapuzado came closer, eyes gleaming faintly beneath the cowl, silent but unmistakably threatening. The weight of lurking peril wrapped tight around the trio. The chief's hand dropped to the carved bow across his back, fingers tightening resolutely. The woman's gaze met the chief's, a silent plea and stark recognition of their reality. Trust had not yet blossomed, but necessity drove their unity. The warmth of the ruins seemed to fade under the cold breath of the approaching danger. Outside, the night deepened. The crack of twigs and barely heard movements painted a grim overture, an impending assault scripted in shadows. "We must be ready," the chief stated, voice low and fierce. "Their hunger has found us here." The woman swallowed the rising lump of fear, yet beneath it, a seed of determination grew. This place of sacred whispers had spoken again, calling them to face the darkness, not as prey, but as those willing to stand and fight. The hooded figure paused at the edge of the circle, a breath between predator and prey. The chief's voice broke the silence, hard and commanding. "Come forth." The darkness shifted. The figure's hand crept toward the blade, hidden beneath the cloak. A sharp gust stirred leaves into a frantic dance, scattering dust and secrets alike. Then, without warning, a sudden movement, swift and silent, as the figure lunged forward under the veil of night. The clash was brief but brutal, piercing the still air with the raw taste of violence. The woman's heart thundered as she moved instinctively, caught between flight and fight. The chief's aim was true. A crack echoed as a weapon struck wood, the figure staggering back. But the threat remained, a ghost of intention that clung to the shadows, waiting. As the echoes of the encounter faded, the ruins held their breath once more. The woman wiped cold sweat from her brow, eyes burning with newfound steel. "The night is no sanctuary," she whispered, voice tight with resolve. "Whatever hunts us knows where to strike." The chief nodded, grim but unyielding. "We cannot linger," he declared. "This place gave us strength, but the hunt presses close. The forest will not shield us much longer." Beneath the canopy of ancient stone and whispered spirits, they gathered themselves for what was to come, bound by fragile trust and the looming storm. Beyond, the ruins, the darkness stirred anew. The silent watcher withdrew, melting into the night, the promise of an ambush hanging thick in the air. The hunt had found them. The encapuzado's footsteps faded into the void, but the danger had only just begun. The night air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine resin as tangled shadows crept closer, hugging the ancient ruins like silent sentinels of forgotten times. The clash of steel and wood had faded into uneasy quiet, leaving bones and spirits of the past to bear witness to the shattered moment. The woman's breath came ragged, heart hammering against ribs that threatened to give way beneath the tension that still clung to her skin. Her eyes met the Apache chief's, fierce and unyielding beneath the waning moonlight. Neither spoke, but the weight of what had transpired settled between them. A brutal message carved in violence and silence. The figure who had launched the attack lay retreating into the shadows, but the menace lingered like a ghost, unseen yet palpable. "We cannot linger here," the chief said, voice low and filled with quiet fire. "This place, sacred though it is, offers no shield tonight. They know the ground as well as we do." The woman nodded, every muscle aching, but sharpened now with resolve. Her fingers clenched the ragged cloth she carried, the secrets woven within, becoming heavier than any wound. "They hunt us," she whispered, driven by greed and fear, a hunger for blood that will not be sated. Behind the crumbling stone walls, the flicker of distant fires sparked. Like warning lights in the darkness, she could almost hear the echo of footsteps, faint but closing, a grim promise that this night was far from over. The chief stripped off the last remnants of his ceremonial regalia, the gesture both practical and symbolic. His face bore the carved lines of hardship and loss, years etched into the weathered map of his skin. "We heal where we can. The tribe must prepare. But first, we gather strength," he said, voice steady, despite the storm raging beneath. A glance toward the young warrior revealed tension etched into the youth's expression. His eyes burned with the fire of impending battle. But beneath that, an undercurrent of uncertain hope, born from watching the woman fight, her courage a fragile flame against relentless night. Silence fell, as then, three huddled within the smallest shelter the ruins offered. Flakes of ash drifted lazily from a dying fire outside, mingling with the fragile threads of whispered prayers that wove around them like a cloak. The woman's gaze fell to the floor, hands trembling as her words broke the stillness between them. "There is something I have held back," she confessed, her voice barely above a breath. "Not all my story is known. The messages I carry speak of a traitor, a wolf hidden amongst the tribe, one who wears the face of friend but stabs in the dark." The chief's eyes darkened, shadowed by the ghosts of countless battles fought on twisted soil. "A traitor is poison in the veins of a people," he said quietly. "Your presence here is no accident, nor is your secret. We must tread carefully, for shadows grow deeper at night." The young warrior's face tightened, fists clenched. "If betrayal walks among us, it can ruin everything, undo our survival even before the enemy strikes." "We must find who feeds this darkness," the chief declared. "Trust cannot be given lightly, yet we cannot act in blind rage. We must be a blade honed by wisdom." Outside, the wind moaned through the broken arches, carrying fragments of distant cries and the urgent pounding of hooves across jagged stone. The enemy drew nearer with every passing heartbeat. The woman swallowed hard, battling the rising tide of fear. "They seek to silence us, to bury the truth beneath blood and fire." The chief's eyes flicked toward the fading light beyond the ruins. "Tonight, The enemy is both without and within. Our path is perilous. We are running out of time. Suddenly, a sharp rustle sliced through the dark. All three stiffened as a shadow emerged from the periphery. Silent, purposeful, a predator among the ruins. The hooded figure from before. The chase was no longer a game of shadows. It was a war waged in the heart of sacred ground. The woman's hands tightened around the cloth. Every sensation heightened, the prick of cold night air, the scent of pine mingled with sweat, the electric buzz of imminent violence. The chief's bow appeared in a fluid motion, fingers tightening on the wooden curve, his stance ready. They have found us. We must face the storm as one. The young warrior stepped forward, resolve in his gaze. No, enemy will breach this night without bloodshed. The figures froze, a moment stretched thin between breath and action. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the whispers of ancient spirits swirling in the air like smoke. Then, without warning, the figure lunged, blade glinting sharp as moonlight. A flash of steel breaking the stillness in a deadly arc. The chief met the strike with steady hands, the clash reverberating like thunder through the ruins. The woman's heart pounded fiercely, every nerve alive with the raw immediacy of survival. From the frayed edges of that confrontation, courage bloomed. The woman stepped forward, voice steady despite the tremble beneath. I will not hide any longer. Hear me. The traitor's name is tied to those who ride with the enemy. Eyes locked, tension rippling like a storm about to break. The chief's gaze narrowed thoughtfully, shadows flickering with hard truth. We move at dawn, he announced quietly. Tonight is for healing and for the fire of resolve. We stand together or we fall divided. Outside the ruins, the first light of moon faded beyond the tree line. The forest whispered tales of coming battles and shattered trust. While within the walls of the sacred place, a fragile bond cemented through blood and secret truth. Farther off, the enemy drew closer, their footsteps pounding a grim countdown. And in the deepening dark, the words fell heavy upon the wind. A messenger rides swiftly, bearing news that the enemy's pursuit is bound to a traitor within the very heart of the Apache tribe. The council fire flickered dimly within the shadowed lodge, its fragile glow casting long, wavering shapes onto the faces gathered there. The air was thick with tension, each breath drawn heavy with unspoken doubt and the weight of looming peril. The chief sat at the center, his weathered hands folded tightly on his lap. Eyes, dark pools, reflecting both resolve and pain. Around him, the elders exchanged furtive glances, some hardened by years of battle, others marked with the soft lines of wearied hope. The woman sat near the edge, her posture guarded, every muscle taut as the silence stretched like a taut bowstring. Outside, the wind whispered through the branches, carrying restless shadows and the distant echo of hoofbeats, a stark reminder that the enemy lurked ever closer, threading their way through the forest like a creeping storm. The chief's voice broke the heavy, quiet, low and grave. We face a great dilemma. To harbor one who once lived among foes is to invite risk upon our people. Yet the stranger carries knowledge, secrets that could be the key to survival. From the corner, the young warrior's voice cut sharp, the steel in his tone betraying his struggle. This woman is no mere captive. She walks with truths that shake the ground beneath us. Yet, her presence unsettles the tribe. Many demand her departure before the enemy's claws close over us. A murmuring rose among the elders, faces etched with conflict, voices a tangled weave of suspicion and cautious hope. The woman's gaze flickered to the young warrior, her anguished defender, then dropped to the rough-hewn floor beneath her. "I have no desire to harm your people," she murmured, voice brittle with fear yet steadied by necessity. "But I carry a warning of betrayal nestled within your own ranks, a traitor whose hand reaches into the heart of your tribe." The chief's eyes narrowed, a storm flickering beneath calm resolve. "A poison close to the heart can kill faster than any arrow. We must tread with sharpened senses." An elder woman, her hair a silver veil around a solemn face, spoke quietly but with undeniable weight. "If this truth is known, it may divide us, yet hiding from shadows brings only ruin." Outside the lodge, the rhythmic pounding of horses grew louder, shouting rippling through the trees like breaking waves. The enemy's hunger pressed on, merciless and unrelenting. The chief rose, his silhouette cutting a figure of grim determination against the firelight. "We will send scouts to track the enemy's movements. Meanwhile, we must choose to stand united or fracture beneath fear." The young warrior stepped forward, jaw clenched tight. "I will speak for her. Her courage in battle has earned respect. To cast her out now would be surrender." A tense silence settled again, broken only by the ember's quiet crackle. The woman's voice came softer this time, raw and wary. "I trusted little when I came to you, yet now I stand between the day's last light and the endless night. I do not ask for forgiveness, only a chance to prove the weight of my words." Suddenly, the outer door slammed open, a cold breeze pouring in with the clamor. Scout riders burst in, faces streaked with dust and urgency. "The enemy advances faster than before," one reported, voice sharp with exhaustion. "They exploit every trail, every weakness. But worse, some of our own have faltered. There are whispers of a traitor aiding the enemy's path." A murmur of alarm swept the room, eyes darting in disbelief, then narrowing with suspicion. The chief's jaw tightened, the lines of leadership carved deeper by the chill of betrayal. "Gather all who remain loyal," he commanded, in a voice that brooked no dissent. "Prepare defenses. We do not surrender to shadows, nor to knives hidden in friendly hands." The young warrior's face tightened with grim resolve. The battle is as much within as without. The woman rose slowly, strength blooming from the brittle shell of fear. "I will aid in uncovering this treachery." Time slips through bleeding fingers. Every moment lost threatens us all. Outside beyond the lodge, a sharp cry reverberated, the sound splitting the night like a blade. The watchman's voice rose in alarm. "Ambush! At the southern ridge! Several of our warriors have been taken." The room erupted into controlled chaos. The chief's eyes blazed, finger pointing toward the looming shadows beyond the walls. They grow bolder, Our enemies see cracks in our defenses. Tonight, the price of weakness is paid in blood. The woman felt the weight of her secret pressed tightly against her chest, heavier now than ever. The fragile alliance, forged in fire and fear, was about to face its cruelest test. Outside the lodge, wolves howled to the moon, and distant riders thundered closer, swift and merciless. The chief's voice cut through the mounting storm. We cannot waver. The tribe's fate hangs in balance. We move at first light. His gaze locked with hers, fierce and unyielding. But for now, we survive the night. The woman swallowed the turmoil rising like fire. The hunt was far from over. From the darkness beyond, hoofbeats and shouts drew nearer. Bold arrows notched and ready to fly. And then, a chilling silence fell. She caught her breath. A trembling whisper rode the wind. Some of our warriors have been captured. The room held its breath. The trap was set. The enemy's shadow deepened. The true battle had begun. The sun hadn't yet touched the eastern ridge when the Apache chief, his face carved by years of war and wisdom, gathered the woman close, the weight of the captured warriors tugging at his heart. His eyes, dark as the soil beneath their feet, met hers with a gravity that spoke of unspoken risk. "We move at first light," he said, voice low but firm. "The path is fraught, traps set with cunning, enemies hiding in shadows familiar to us all." Her breath trembled, not from the chill, but from the storm of urgency swirling inside. Besides them, the young warrior adjusted his grip on his rifle, eyes sharp and unyielding. "They sought to break our ranks," he muttered, voice rough with barely restrained anger, "but they have only strengthened our resolve." The trio slipped quietly into the thickening forest, the dawn's pale light filtering through the dense canopy like hesitant hope. Each step was a delicate balance. One false move could doom the captives beyond reach. The scent of pine mingled with the bitter tang of dirt and sweat, a reminder of the battle yet to come and the trust that was fragile but real between them. The chief's fingers brushed the worn haft of his bow, heart steadying despite the tight coil of tension in his chest. "We are hunters now, not of prey, but of justice and survival," he whispered, nostrils flaring at every scent carried on the brisk breeze. The woman kept close, muscles aching, but mind razor-sharp. Her secret, heavy like a stone upon her chest, threatened to suffocate her. Yet beneath the fear, a seed of courage took root, sprouting in this shared mission. She dared to hope that the torn pieces of her world might find some order amid chaos. They reached the narrow entrance of the canyon, where the warriors were believed to be held, its jagged walls standing like ancient sentinels, guarding death and deliverance alike. Echoes of distant voices clattered against rock, sharp and cruel. Her heart hammered in sync, a frantic drum of life and loss. "They are close," the young warrior muttered. "Too close." The chief nodded, eyes narrowing like hawks surveying prey. "We cannot falter. Our enemies believe the Apache are broken, scattered. They are wrong. A sudden rustling to their side made all three freeze, the crunch of dry leaves beneath careful footsteps. A shadow peeled itself from the underbrush, a figure familiar in shape, yet transformed by hardship. "Traitor," the woman's whisper cracked the silence. The chief's breath caught, his gaze darkening. Before words could pass, a hail of arrows burst from the thicket. Swift and ruthless, the trio dived behind jagged boulders, hearts pounding in the sudden chaos. The canyon trembled beneath the volley of war cries and the clash of steel. The chief's arrows flew with measured precision, cutting through the enemy ranks. Each shot, a message etched in vengeance and survival. The young warrior roared defiance, his rifle cracking like thunder over the battlefield. Through the cacophony, the woman's eyes searched for the captives. Their ragged forms bound and guarded. Her breath hitched when she spotted them, faces pale but eyes burning with stubborn flame. "We must reach them," she insisted, voice fierce despite the trembling in her limbs. The chief nodded sharply, signaling the young warrior to cover their flank. Moving with the swiftness and silence of mountain cats, the woman and chief pressed forward, weaving through the chaos, guided by desperation and hope. Suddenly, a figure lunged from behind a rock, an enemy masked by malice and hidden allegiance. The chief caught the blade inches from his throat, twisting it away, the clash ringing like a bell tolling doom. "Hold fast," he ordered, breath ragged but fierce. The woman seized her chance, pulling loose ropes from a fallen soldier's belt, working quickly to free the nearest captive. The warrior's battered hands trembled but clenched in silent gratitude. Around them, battle surged like wildfire, but for a moment the small circle of freedom grew. A sharp cry echoed, "They come from the ridge!" And suddenly, enemy reinforcements poured into the canyon's mouth, their numbers overwhelming. The young warrior's voice cut through the turmoil. "We are surrounded." The chief's eyes hardened, the flicker of desperation replaced by steel resolve. "Then we make our stand." They edged deeper into the canyon's narrowest point, the walls closing in like the jaws of fate. Here, few could approach without exposing themselves to the crossfire of arrows and bullets. The woman steadied her breathing, gripping a salvaged pistol with trembling hands. Fear clashed with determination in her chest, each beat a battle. Together, she whispered to the chief and the young warrior, their nods a pact forged in fire. The enemy pressed, a tide relentless and brutal. But the trio and their rescued warriors fought with desperation, each movement a defiance of death's claim. Stones echoed with battle cries, the air thick with smoke, and the electric charge of pain and courage. Until, as if the canyon itself mourned or blessed, a sharp horn pierced the din, a signal unknown, a summons of names that would soon be carved into legend. And then, the unmistakable sound of boots pounding behind them, closing in fast. The enemy had corralled them in, the narrow gorge their inescapable prison. Trapped between stone walls and merciless foes, surrounded on all sides, the chief's jaw clenched under the weight of the moment. The woman's gaze met his. Fear and fierce hope mingled, knowing the next breath might be the one that shapes their fate forever. They were cornered in the canyon's throat, almost without chance of escape. The canyon's throat echoed with the battle cries and the relentless clash of wills. The Apache chief stood with steady hands and unwavering eyes, his people's survival tethered to the fierce rhythm of their defense. His warriors formed tight ranks, shielded behind jagged boulders, arrows nocked and rifles raised to meet the incoming storm. The intruders surged forward, countless and furious, hoping to crush what remained of resistance. Amid the chaos, the woman moved with unexpected purpose. Her earlier fears had hardened into resolve. Clutching the secret she bore, like a flickering flame, she scanned the battlefield with sharp eyes, spotting the subtle shifts in enemy formation. She understood that this fight was not just for their bodies, but for the fragile balance of trust that had taken root between her and the tribe. Shouts split the smoky air as the chief called commands, orchestrating his warriors like a conductor of war. His voice was grim, layered with a burden older than this moment, a weight of countless battles fought beneath these skies. His gaze found the woman briefly, acknowledgement flickering in the same breath that bound them in this crucible. Suddenly, the enemy's forces tightened their grip, funneling the defenders toward a narrow pass where escape seemed impossible. The walls of the canyon loomed like silent executioners. Horses stamped and hooves churned the earth, a cacophony of inevitable doom. From the shadows, the young warrior flanked the enemy's advance, his rifle cracking through the air. Despite the barrage, the attackers pushed relentlessly forward, their numbers swelling like a merciless tide. The woman's heart hammered violently under her ribs, each breath ragged with anticipation. A flash of movement caught her eye, a figure emerging from behind a cluster of boulders. It was one of the captured warriors, recently freed by the trio's desperate efforts, now rejoining the fray with wild-eyed fury. His presence bolstered the tired defenders, stirring a flicker of hope amid the battering storm. The chief raised his bow, drawing the string taut. His arrow flew swift and true, nicking a foe before another surged too close. Each shot was a prayer, a plea etched in resolve and blood. The young warrior's steady rifle fire pinned an advancing enemy, buying them precious moments in this tightening snare. Amid this cacophony, the woman stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tumult like a jagged blade. "Use the narrow trails," she urged urgently. "The canyon twists. If we can split their forces, we might turn this fight." The chief nodded, eyes piercing the shrinking daylight. "We move now, as one." Together, they surged toward the jagged side. Paths, hidden veins that spiderwebbed through the cliffs. The attackers were relentless, but their familiarity with the land paled against the chief's ancient knowledge and the woman's desperate counsel. Suddenly, a murderous cry lifted from the enemy's ranks. The traitor revealed, stepping from the shadows to lead a brutal charge. His eyes glittered with cruel satisfaction, knowing the trap was closing. The woman's stomach clenched. This man's betrayal had cost blood and trust already. The chief met the traitor's gaze with steely defiance. "Your knife may cut flesh, but it will never sever the spirit of this land." The traitor sneered, lunging forward with reckless abandon. Steel sang against steel as the chief parried. Their battle, a tempest in miniature within the wider conflict. Around them, the tide of combat surged and swirled like wildfire. With grim determination, the woman took aim, releasing a shot that found its mark, disrupting the traitor's charge and buying precious seconds. He stumbled, but recovered, gritting his teeth with venomous hatred. Behind them, the narrow paths twined like serpents, and the defenders split their foes, forcing chaos among the invaders. The young warrior rallied the freed captives, their resolve stiffening with each encounter. The clash intensified, each moment but desperate gambit. Arrows darkened the sky, bullets tore grooves into the stones, and the air pulsed with the pain of warring souls. After what seemed like an eternity compressed into heartbeats, the enemy's momentum faltered. Wearied and beaten, their ranks frayed, forced to pull back into the gathering dusk. The chief lowered his weapon, chest heaving but unbowed. Around him, his people breathed ragged relief, bruised but unbroken. The woman's gaze searched the dimming horizon, heart heavy with the cost, yet flickering with fierce hope. A hushed silence settled over the canyon, broken only by whispered prayers and the crackling of rekindled fires. They had endured the storm, for now. Yet even as the battle's echoes faded, a subtle sound stirred the unsettled air, a whisper born not of fear, but of fragile hope. The chief's eyes sharpened, sensing the weight in that tremulous breath. Then, through the quiet, a trembling whisper rippled, not a shout of victory, but a soft murmur that trembled like a promise and a question lingering on the wind, heralding the uncertain days ahead. The canyon's atmosphere throbbed with tension, the sharp crack of arrows, the pounding hoofbeats, and the clash of steel weaving a deadly symphony beneath the looming cliffs. The chief's eyes gleamed with steel resolve as he rallied his warriors closer, their breath heavy, bodies poised as a living wall between life and death. The enemy pressed hard, their ranks swelling with fierce determination, believing the Apache broken and scattered. They would soon learn otherwise. The woman, heart hammering in sync with the battle's pulse, moved quietly alongside the chief. The secret she bore was a fragile flame, now a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. Her gaze measured the enemy's formation, calculating, searching for cracks in their flank. The trust that had begun as fragile threads now bound her to these warriors with fierce determination. Her survival depended on this bond, as did theirs. "Use the narrow trails," she called, voice clear yet edged with urgency, cutting through the din. "The canyon's twists will split their forces. If we move swiftly, we can turn the tide." The chief nodded sharply, eyes alight with grim understanding. "We stand as one," he called, voice a low thunder above the fray. Together they darted toward the jagged side paths that wound like veins through the stones, their advantage in this desperate fight. The enemy exploded forward in brutal waves, relentless and furious, but their knowing of the land paled against the chief's deep knowledge and the woman's desperate guidance. Suddenly, from shadowed cover stepped the traitor, his venomous gaze glinting with cruel satisfaction. This wolf in sheep's clothing led with savage cunning, having bled both tribe and invaders. The woman's breath caught. A familiar wound reopened. The chief met the traitor's leer with unflinching defiance. "Your blade severs flesh, but not the spirit of this land," he declared, voice hard as stone. Steel sang in the canyon air as they clashed, the chief's movements honed by years of battle, parrying with deadly grace. Around them, the battle swirled like wildfire, echoes of pain and fury mingling under the sky's fading light. Seizing a breath, the woman raised her pistol, fire igniting fiercely in her gaze. She let loose a shot, true and devastating, disrupting the traitor's charge. He stumbled back, teeth clenched in venomous rage, but the moment bought precious breaths for the defenders. The young warrior called to the freed captives, rallying them with raw intensity, their battered resolve hardening into iron. Amid the frantic whirlwind, arrows darkened the sky, bullets tore through jagged stone, and the crescendo of battle reached its zenith. Slowly, exhaustion and loss bit into the enemy ranks. They faltered, their fury dampened by relentless defiance. Forced back into the deepening dusk, the attackers withdrew, bruised and beaten. The chief lowered his weapons, chest heaving but spirit unbroken. Around him, his people's ragged breaths whispered relief, a fragile peace carved from the chaos. The woman's eyes searched the horizon, heavy with the cost, but flickering fiercely with hope. Their endurance had transformed the storm into a moment of respite, an uneasy calm born from shared courage. A quiet settled over the canyon, broken only by whispered prayers and the last flickers of rekindled fires. The battle was won, for now. Yet beneath the calm, a subtle sound stirred, a trembling whisper carried in the wind, not of fear, but of fragile hope. The chief's eyes sharpened, sensing the weight in that soft breath, a promise and a warning lingering on the dusk. Later, as silence deepened in the refuge of their camp, the woman sat beside the chief, beneath the watchful stars. The brutal battle had changed everything. The line between enemy and ally now blurred into an inked tapestry of shared survival. "Our fight was never just against them," the chief said, voice low and reflective. "It was a fight within us as well." She nodded, fatigue and relief mingling in her gaze. "And through it, a path has been carved. A new way, not just of war, but of understanding." His weathered hand rested lightly on hers, a rare gesture, luminous in its simplicity. "You stand with us now, not as stranger, but as part of this land's breath and blood." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of past wounds softening under the vast sky. The woman dared to glimpse beyond the scars, to imagine a future where trust would blossom like the desert's rarest flower. As dawn's first light crested the ridge, it washed warmly over the canyon walls, gold spilling into the shadows like a benediction. The tribe, bruised but unbowed, began the slow task of healing. The traitor's betrayal had cut deep, but had not severed their spirit. The woman found a place among them, quietly, with tentative hope, and the chief watched with cautious pride, knowing peace was fragile but worth the fight. The horizon stretched before them, vast, untamed, yet holding the promise of change. The air was thick with whispered shadows, carrying the memories of bloodshed and the faint glimmer of redemption. Together, they looked forward, toward a land where whispered truths, the courage of unlikely allies, and the bonds forged in struggle would lay the foundations for a fragile, enduring peace. The canyon breathed a long, slow exhale, as if releasing all the ghosts it held. Above, the sun climbed higher, igniting the vast sky. The wind carried a trembling whisper, not of fear, but of hope, and in its soft breath lay a promise that even in the harshest lands where death once roamed unchecked, the quiet power of compassion and trust could weave new destinies. Their story closed here, beneath these ancient stones and endless skies, sealed with blood, shadows, and the light of dawn breaking finally over the frontier.